Welcome to the 22nd chapter of the book of Isaiah. It begins the Rima, matter of the ravine of Zion. Zion is Jerusalem. Earlier was considered the city of David towards the top, next to the where the temple was. So the matter is of the ravine of Zion. So the subject of this chapter basically, as we see it right here, is Jerusalem. And it says, "What happened to you that now you all ascended unto the roofs in vain?" Well, this is what Isaiah is seeing, so I don't necessarily think it's what's happening at the time that he's writing it. It's like he's seeing it, he's telling what he sees. And so either it's the time at close to this when he's writing it, or it's a future at the an end time, and we'll go through and see all the things and bring them out. But something happened that they all ascended onto the roofs in vain. Well, we know that Jerusalem's been attacked many different times, so it could be that would not help us to determine exactly which one he's talking about. And then he continues, the city was filled of ones yelling. You're slain, travmatia, you can add that to the English Derivatives book. Traumatize comes from that. Your slain are not slain ones by swords, nor your dead ones by war. Well, that's how else would they be dead? Some type of a disease, or is it a spiritual deadness? Exactly, I'm not exactly sure, but they are considered dead ones, and however they are dead. All your rulers have fled together from the bow. So it does sound like a war. Your dead ones nor by war, but it's from the bow, some type of an action. I'm not exactly sure why it says not by war, but then it goes into all your rulers have fled together from the bow. The bow is, with the word toxin, is where we get the word toxology with poisons, because in the early days, they with the bow and the arrow, they put poisons on the arrow. They are being tied, and the ones being strong among you have fled at a distance. So apparently he's talking about a time when Jerusalem is going through a lot of problems. A lot of people are dead, and other ones have left. On account of this I said, let me go, I shall weep bitterly. You should not grow strong to comfort me over the destruction of the daughter of my people. I don't want to be comforted, for it is a day of disturbance and destruction and trampling and an addiction to a delusion by the Lord of hosts. Well, the addiction to a delusion is an interesting statement. In Jeremiah 4:11, who writes just after this time of Isaiah, it says, in that time they shall say to this people and to Jerusalem, there is a spirit of addiction to a delusion in the wilderness. The way of the daughter of my people is not to purity nor to holiness. So here he's got the daughter, and it also has the addiction to a delusion. They give a little bit more information that this is Jerusalem, and the people are not pure. They're not holy. Also in Ezekiel 44:13 it says, and they shall bear their lawlessness, and shall not approach unto me to officiate as priests to me, nor to lead forward to all the holy things of the holies. And they shall bear their dishonor in the delusion in which they wandered. So we see up here that they were wandering, and I believe it was wandering here, but trampled. In Ezekiel 44, he's talking about the Levites. So basically the clergy, which we would call today, has failed in their the things, and in a delusion in which they wandered. Now this is Ezekiel 44:13. So the last 10 chapters, 40 to the end, are all have to do at a future end time. So that end time, excuse me, is when the temple is rebuilt during the 1,000-year reign, possibly. Sounds like it might be from when we get into Ezekiel. We'll go through all of that. And then in Ezekiel 48:11 it says, "It shall be for the priests having been sanctified, the sons of Zadok, the ones keeping the watches of the house, who wandered not in the delusion of the sons of Israel, in which manner the Levites wandered." Ezekiel 48:11. So this addiction to a delusion is something that's brought out. The addiction to a delusion was a charge that Paul used, that they were addicted to a delusion, and the delusion was not for Jesus Christ. It was against Jesus Christ. They were deluded in thinking that he was from Satan at one time, from Beelzebub. So exactly right here what Isaiah is talking about could be later a time of the Romans. And it says, they wander in the ravine of Zion. Jerusalem has mainly three ravines or valleys. The Kidron, which runs north and east, and it separates from Mount Zion. And then there's the valley of Gehenna, or the valley of the sons of Hinnom. And in that valley, which is south of Jerusalem, there is a place called Akeldama, the field of blood, towards the eastern part of that southern valley, where they bought the land that Joshua threw the silver back at them. And then a place called Tophet that was in the valley also, where they sacrificed their children. In this valley they buried the dead, and the dung gate opened up to go out on this valley, apparently from the wind so it would blow away. And the third major valley was the Tyropoeon, where now it's more of a plain, but I suppose I read back in the time of Jesus it was more of a valley, and there were bridges going across from Jerusalem, crossing over the Tyropoeon valley. And that was Tyropoeon was at the north to the west of the wall. So they wander from small unto great upon the mountain. So there we go, is exactly where I was looking for that wandering. But the Elamites took quivers and men riders upon horses, and there was a gathering of a battle array. So the Elamites were the Persians, as we mentioned, Iran today, and we went in the last chapter about Michael and the prince of ruler of Persia. So this doesn't, right here at 6, leads me to believe that this whole address by Isaiah is something for the future and not was something that was happening, because the Elamites never attacked, from what I see, Jerusalem. And your ravines will be, your choice ravines will be filled of chariots, and the horsemen shall obstruct your gates. So there's going to be some type of a military coming against Jerusalem, and the chariots and the horsemen could very well be like tanks and people that ride jeeps and different types of vehicles. And they shall uncover the gates of Judah, and they shall look in that day unto the choice houses of the city. Well, it doesn't say they went in, but they are looking. And they shall uncover the hidden places of the houses of the Acra of David. Now, who is this they shall uncover? Is it the Persians, or is this the people that are there in Jerusalem? That is a question that I'm not really sure, but what it is right here, I'm thinking it turned over to the time, even of the time of Hezekiah, which Isaiah is living. So there's a possibility here that there's a change. And it says, and they saw that there were many more, and they turned the water of the ancient pool into the city, which they did during Hezekiah's time. So either that was Hezekiah, or is in the future with the Persians, or the doesn't sound like it was during the time of Hezekiah, but I don't know. And yet they demolished the houses of Jerusalem for fortification of the walls of the city. So here it sounds like the people of the city demolished the walls, the houses to build up the wall. And you produced for yourselves water between the two walls inside the ancient pool. So that might be referring to Hezekiah's tunnel, where they diverted the water from the going into the pool of Siloam. But you look not to the excuse me, from the well, the spring of Gihon came up and then went into the well of Siloam. But you look not to the one making it in the beginning, and the one creating it you beheld not. So it sounds like whatever time this is, that the people are not going to God. But during Hezekiah's time, if that's what it was, Hezekiah did go to the Lord. He called on Isaiah. So to me, again, this is a future time, what I would say. And the Lord of hosts the Lord of hosts called for weeping in that day, and beating the breast, and shaving, and girding up sackcloths. So that was definitely at the time towards the end in Revelation. But they were making, the description is, but they were making glad and leaping for joy, slaying calves and sacrificing sheep so as to eat meats and to drink wine. They weren't paying attention to what was coming against them, saying, we should eat and drink, for tomorrow we die. And this was a quote I believe it was by Paul. And these things are being uncovered in the ears of the Lord of hosts, Sabaoth. For this sin shall not be forgiven to you until whenever you should die. So it's some type of a final thing that will happen to these people, some finality to it. Thus says the Lord of Sabaoth, go into the chamber to Shebna, the storekeeper, and say to him. Well, now this Shebna is mentioned other places, but it's not the same, the storekeeper. There's a Shebna is mentioned with this next person is he's a scribe. He's not a storekeeper. So I don't believe this is the same Shebna it's talking about. If you see where here we'll get into Eliakim. And Eliakim is so many times tied into Shebna the priest. But this is not, the Shebna the scribe. But this is not Shebna the scribe, it's the storekeeper. And say to him. Now, why it's mentioning this Shebna the storekeeper and say to him, I don't know. As we go through here, it might be a type of a situation that was going on of the people that Isaiah is using. Go into the chamber as to Shebna the scribe and say to him, why are you here? And what is it to you here that you quarry to yourself here a memorial? And you made to yourself in the high place a memorial, and depicted to yourself a dwelling in the rock. So apparently this Shebna was making himself out to be very important, whatever he was doing, making memorials for him. Behold, indeed, the Lord of hosts shall cast out and shall obliterate such a man. So it doesn't say Shebna, but such a man that's lifting himself up, and shall remove your apparel and your honorable crown. Well, the crown doesn't sound like it would be on Shebna, because he's a storekeeper. So what would he be doing with the crown? So here I think he's talking about something else. The crown being removed from the crown. Now, is a future king or who? Well, it goes on and it says, and will toss you into a great and unmeasured place, and there you shall die. Now, the crown could be talking about in the future with the beast. I'm not sure. And he will establish your good chariot for dishonor, and the house of your ruler for trampling. It could be Jerusalem, almost any time with all these descriptions. of the chariot for dishonor, and the house of your ruler for trampling. And you shall be removed from out of your administration and from out of your station. Well, that could be with the station of the storekeeper. And it will be in that day, even I will call my servant Eliakim, the son of Hilkiah. Now, this Eliakim is mentioned in 2 Kings 18 to 19:2. And as I mentioned, he's tied into the Shebna, the scribe. And that's another place is in Isaiah 36:3 to 37:2. And it's almost they're identical stories, actually. So you can go to them and you'll find out about the things that this Eliakim has done. He is one of the people that goes to King Hezekiah, and he talks. First time he goes to the wall, and then when Jerusalem is attacked by the Assyrians, they call out on the wall, and Eliakim and a couple of other men come, and they listen to Rabshakeh, the Assyrian, and then they tell him to don't speak in Hebrew, we understand Syriac, and well, he says he's doing it to, basically Rabshakeh wants the people to hear what the terrible things he has in plan for them. So this Eliakim apparently knew Syriac, and then he went in and took the letter to Hezekiah, and him and these other men, and they tore their robes, and then they were sent to Elijah. And this is, like I mentioned, we'll be bringing about that when we get down to the 36th chapter. But now it will be in that day, even I will call the servant of mine, Eliakim the son of Hilkiah. Okay, well now this word is interesting. Paitha, pace, is in the nominative. 38:16, and if you look in the English, not the English rib, you look in the lexical concordance of the Apostolic Bible, in the rear you'll see that it's servant and child, manservant, maidservant, child. It's used in different ways, and it depends on the context of how it's used. Here Eliakim's not a child. Well, he's a son because it calls him, well, that son is, I added that in because it's in italics. My child, Eliakim, you could say that, the son of Hilkiah. But this my servant is a theme that goes throughout the book of Isaiah. It's even quoted where it talks about the servant. It says in Matthew 12:18, which is a quote of Isaiah 42:1. In Matthew, it says, "Behold, my child, or my servant, whom I selected, my beloved, in whom my soul takes pleasure." And this is Jesus. "I will put my spirit upon him, and he will report judgment to the nations." So, now why do I bring that up? If it's obvious here, it says Eliakim, the son of Hilkiah. Well, I'm not sure if that's exactly what it's talking about. As we go through, I'll bring these things out. And then in Isaiah 49:6, it says, and he said, it is a great thing for you to be called my servant, to establish the tribes of Jacob and to return dispersion of Israel. Behold, I have given you for a covenant of a race, for a light of nations. And that was a description of God, Jesus. And so then it continues, and I will put upon him your apparel. Well, now the scribe putting on the apparel of the storeman doesn't seem like a good trade. Would think the scribe that was much more important than the Hilkiah. And he says, and I will give to him your crown and might, and your administration I will put into his hands. So, to me, it says Jesus. I just can't see, because it's the crown goes on to the head of Jesus. It's taken away from the kings of Israel, basically. And your administration I will put into his hands. It wasn't put into the hands of Hilkiah. He was a scribe, and there's no place that says that he didn't become a king. He didn't have a crown. And he shall be as a father to the ones dwelling Jerusalem, and to the ones dwelling Judah. And now here's a key verse and I will put to him the key of the house of David upon his shoulder. And he shall open, and there will not be one locking, and he shall lock, and there shall not be one opening. So here, this is same thing as said in the book of Revelation 3:7. It says, thus says the Holy One, the true, the one having the key of David, the one opening and no one locks, and locks and no one opens. So in Revelation, if this is saying this is who he is, why wouldn't he be the same thing here? Now, using Hilkiah, the son of, forgot his name, Eliakim, the son of Hilkiah. Well, it also mentioned Emmanuel. His name will be called Emmanuel, but there's no place in the New Testament where his name was Emmanuel, so it's a description. And the description of this Eliakim, the name Eliakim means God sets up, or God sets in place. So I think this is a sign of the situation of what God is using this person's name to describe, that the setting up of the kingdom of Jesus Christ, and where he is now. He gets the key of the house of David upon his shoulder, and he locks and so forth. And I will give the glory of David to him. So it wasn't given after Hezekiah. I don't think it was to Hezekiah, because the Eliakim was probably during the time of Hezekiah, and Eliakim didn't become king. Now, there was an Eliakim that did become king at the end, but I doubt if that's the one it's talking about. But it says, and he will rule, and there will not be one disputing. And I think it became Jehoiakim. And I will establish him as ruler in a trustworthy place, and he will be for a throne of glory of his father's house. So these other kings later were not a throne of glory to the father's house. They actually were almost at the end when Israel was destroyed. So this has to be talking about somebody else, and who else would it be? And every honorable one in the house of his father will be relying upon him. Well, Jesus, and we all rely upon Jesus, the ones that are in his house, which we are, from small unto great. Every small vessel from vessels of the cups, and they will be hanging upon him in that day. Thus says the Lord of hosts, the man being fixed fast in a trustworthy place shall be moved, and the glory upon him shall be removed, and shall fall, and shall waste away, for the Lord spoke. Well, I just see that this is talking in a future of that Jesus comes and all the glory is put on him, but then after the death, then it's removed, and the glory is no longer on him except spiritually, for the Lord spoke. It's a difficult chapter to go through. I sat and spent a lot of time trying to figure out exactly what was what, who was where, who was who, and so forth. And this is the best I could come up with. And I'm sure other people look at different things in this chapter in different ways than I have. But this is what I see. And next we'll go into chapter 23, and it continues. It goes in now to a location, Tyre, which is a city that's north of Israel on the ocean. And we'll find out about Tyre, what Isaiah has to say, chapter 23. And I hope you'll join us, and God bless.